Ichika was the only male student in the new academic year at Infinite Stratos Academy, and for him, the first day of school felt overwhelming and nerve-wracking. Before long, his homeroom assistant teacher, Maya, stepped up to the front of the class and greeted the students. None of them responded, which made Maya visibly anxious. She explained that everyone there was a new student at Infinite Stratos Academy. Nervously, she mentioned that it was a boarding school, meaning they would be together both during and after school hours. Maya encouraged everyone to get to know each other better so that the next 3 years could be enjoyable for all of them. She then began taking attendance one by one. Ichika looked extremely tense and tried to call out to Haoki, but she turned her head away. Ichika was confused by her reaction. After all, they were childhood friends who had just reunited after 6 years. He started to wonder if maybe Haoki held some resentment toward him. Maya suddenly called Ichika's name loudly, startling him and making the class burst into laughter. She asked him to introduce himself. Ichika stood up, said his name, and greeted everyone, but most of the students stared at him coldly. He figured that if he kept quiet, they might assume he was gloomy or antisocial. He let out a sigh, and everyone thought he was about to say something more, but he ended it there. Suddenly, a teacher entered the classroom and smacked Ichika on the head. He was completely caught off guard when he realized that it was Chifuyu, his older sister. Ichika reflexively called her older sister, but she immediately hit him again and told him to address her as Ms. Instructor while at school. It turned out Chifuyu had been in a staff meeting, so she had asked Maya to handle the welcome for the new students. Ichika was surprised to see his sister at Infinite Stratos Academy. Her job had always been a mystery, and she would only come home once or twice a year. Chifuyu introduced herself as their homeroom teacher and firmly stated that her goal was to make sure every one of them became competent within the year. Her commanding tone and charismatic presence made the students cheer with excitement. Many of them admired her deeply, and some had even enrolled in the academy just to meet her, including one student who came all the way from northern Kyushu. Chifuyu found it ridiculous that so many airheaded students had ended up in her class. Ichika was shocked to learn that Chifuyu would be his homeroom teacher. She questioned why he had failed to properly introduce himself earlier. When he called her older sister again, she pressed his head down once more. The students started to wonder if Ichika's ability to use the Infinite Stratos was because he was Chifuyu's younger brother. Chifuyu told them to settle down. She announced that she would have them master the basics of Infinite Stratos within 6 months. Only after that would they begin practical training. She gave them just half a month to learn the basic movements. The entire class responded in unison, agreeing to the challenge. It turned out that Chifuyu had once been one of Japan's first-generation Infinite Stratos pilots, but one day she suddenly resigned and disappeared from the public eye. Even Ichika never knew that she had become a teacher, and he regretted worrying about her for so long. Maya then explained that Infinite Stratos was a type of multiform suit developed in Japan. It was originally created 10 years ago with the purpose of space exploration, but development was halted under the Alaska Treaty. The treaty prohibited Infinite Stratos from being used as a military weapon, so it was rebranded as a form of competitive sport. Infinite Stratos Academy was the only training school in the world dedicated to its pilots. Students from all over the globe gathered there to learn how to pilot the suits. Technically, only females could operate the Infinite Stratos, and Ichika was the sole exception, the only male in the world capable of using it. During the break, the students kept watching Ichika, curious about the only boy in the world who could operate an Infinite Stratos. Ichika felt uncomfortable and wished someone would come save him. Suddenly, Haoki approached and asked him to step outside the classroom. Ichika asked if there was something she wanted to tell him, especially since they had not seen each other in 6 years. Haoki looked really nervous. Ichika then congratulated her for winning the national kendo tournament. Haoki was surprised and asked how he knew about that. Ichika said he had read it in the newspaper. He smiled and said even though it had been 6 years since they last saw each other, he could still recognize her instantly, especially since her hairstyle had not changed at all. Haoki looked embarrassed but thanked him for still remembering her. Ichika said there was no way he could ever forget her. Just then, the bell rang. A few students had been watching them from a distance, wondering if Haoki might be a friend of Ichika's. Ichika invited Haoki to head back to class. Later that day, Maya had just finished explaining the lesson and asked the students if anyone had questions about the material. Ichika was completely confused and wondered if he really had to memorize everything in the book. Maya walked up to him and asked if there was anything he wanted to ask. Ichika admitted that he did not understand anything at all. Maya was shocked and asked the rest of the class if anyone else was having trouble with the lesson, but no one did, only Ichika was struggling. Then Chifuyu came over and asked Ichika if he had not read the textbook before school started. Ichika said he had accidentally thrown it away. Chifuyu slapped him and told him she would give him another copy, but he had to memorize the entire book within a week. Ichika obviously protested, but Chifuyu firmly insisted. During the next break, a girl named Cecilia approached Ichika. Charlotte was surprised by how Ichika responded. It came off as a bit rude. Ichika admitted that he did not recognize Cecilia. She was confused as to how he did not know who she was, considering she was the representative of the United Kingdom and had scored the highest on the entrance exam. Ichika then asked what country representative even meant. Cecilia was stunned and wondered if Japanese boys simply lacked basic general knowledge. Ichika asked again what a country representative was, and Cecilia explained that it referred to elite candidates chosen to represent their nation as Infinite Stratos pilots. Cecilia proudly described herself as an elite noble and said people should feel honored to be in the same class as her. Ichika replied that this meant he was lucky, which made Cecilia feel like he was mocking her. She could not understand how someone like Ichika had managed to enroll in the Infinite Stratos Academy while knowing so little. As far as she knew, he was supposed to be the only boy able to operate in Infinite Stratos, but now she was disappointed. Cecilia claimed she was generous, so if there was anything Ichika did not understand, she would teach him, as long as he was willing to ask her nicely. She also boasted that she was the only candidate who had defeated her examiner during the entrance exam. Ichika said that he too had defeated his examiner. Cecilia was stunned, unable to believe it. Ichika explained that the examiner charged straight at him, so he dodged, and the examiner ended up crashing into a wall and stopped moving. Cecilia was not having it. She could not accept that Ichika had defeated the examiner after all. She believed she was the only one who had ever done that. Just then, the school bell rang. Cecilia left but said she would continue their conversation another time. Classes ended for the day, and Ichika headed to his dorm room. When he opened the door, he suddenly heard a girl's voice from the bathroom. It turned out to be his roommate, who said she hoped they would get along. The girl had just finished showering and was wearing only a towel. Ichika was shocked to see Haoki in the room. She was extremely embarrassed and quickly tried to cover herself. She asked why Ichika was in her room, and he said he had been assigned to that room too. He had no idea Haoki would be his roommate. Haoki immediately grabbed her kendo stick and attacked him. She even stabbed it through the door as Ichika tried to close it. Ichika wondered if she was trying to kill him. He would have been seriously hurt if he had not dodged. The commotion drew the attention of other students, and soon a crowd had gathered outside the room. They didn't expect that Ichika's room would be located there. Ichika himself was shocked to see the girls dressed so revealingly. He pleaded with Haoki to open the door and let him in. Haoki stepped out of the room and told Ichika to hurry and get inside. Once inside, she asked Ichika to explain why they were assigned to the same room, even though boys and girls had been separated by beds since the age of 7. Ichika said that kind of rule was outdated, but he admitted that sharing a room after the age of 15 could definitely be an issue. Haoki then asked what exactly Ichika was hoping to gain from sharing a room with her. Ichika responded that he wasn't that foolish. Hearing that, Haoki pointed her kendo sword at him and called him an idiot. Ichika tried to block the kendo stick, clearly scared by Haoki's intense expression. Their friends watching from the doorway felt a little sorry for Haoki. Eventually, she ended her attack and quickly closed the door. She told Ichika that they probably needed to set some boundaries since they would be sharing a room. Haoki set up a bath schedule. She would bathe from 7 to 8, and Ichika could use the bathroom from 8 to 9. Ichika said he preferred to shower earlier. Haoki asked if Ichika expected her to stay sweaty after kendo practice. He pointed out that the kendo club had showers too, but Haoki insisted that she couldn't relax unless she used her own bathroom. Ichika mentioned that home bathrooms were definitely more comfortable than school ones, then realized their room didn't even have a toilet. Haoki explained that the toilets were at the end of the hallway. When Ichika commented that the school was full of female students, Haoki immediately brandished her kendo stick again. She knew exactly what kind of thought Ichika was having. Not wanting to back down, Ichika picked up a kendo stick to defend himself. But to his surprise, Haoki's bra had gotten caught on the tip of his kendo. Embarrassed, Haoki quickly grabbed it back. Ichika, completely innocent, commented that he hadn't realized she wore a bra. Flustered and humiliated, Haoki hit him out of frustration. The next morning at the cafeteria, Ichika and Haoki were having breakfast together. Ichika asked how long Haoki was planning to stay mad at him. She denied being upset, but Ichika pointed out that she looked clearly annoyed. While they were eating, some girls at another table were whispering about how Ichika was the younger brother of Chifuyu. Haoki grew irritated when Ichika casually mentioned her childhood nickname. Soon after, 3 girls approached and asked if they could sit beside Ichika. He welcomed them. Their names were Nagi, Yuko, and Hane. They looked excited to sit next to him. Haoki commented on how much food Ichika was eating. In contrast, Ichika noticed how small the girls' portions were and asked if it was okay for girls to eat so little for breakfast. The 3 of them smiled and admitted they preferred to save room for snacks. After finishing her breakfast, Haoki quickly left. Yuko asked if Ichika was close with Haoki. Nanji even knew that they shared a room. Ichika confirmed it and added that he and Haoki had been childhood friends. The 3 girls were surprised. Ichika explained they had been classmates from 1st to 4th grade, though he didn't remember too much about it. Suddenly, Chifuyu arrived and told everyone to finish their meals quickly. Apparently, besides being their homeroom teacher, Chifuryu was also the dorm supervisor for the first years. She warned that anyone who was late would have to run 10 laps around the field. Ichika finally realized why his sister rarely came home. Her responsibilities were overwhelming. During class, Chifuryu informed everyone that there would be an inter-class tournament happening in 2 weeks. Because of that, each class needed to choose a representative. The class representative wouldn't just compete in the tournament, but also attend student council and event planning meetings. Basically, the role would be similar to that of a class president. Chifuryu asked the students to either nominate themselves or someone else. Out of nowhere, one student nominated Ichika, and soon after, a few others followed. Chifuryu asked if there were any other candidates. If not, Ichika would be appointed automatically. But Ichika declined the nomination. Not long after, Cecilia spoke up, saying she wasn't okay with how the selection was being handled. In her opinion, having a male class representative was embarrassing. She admitted she would feel ashamed if Ichika represented the school for the whole year. On top of that, she was already feeling burdened having to live in what she called an underdeveloped country. Ichika didn't take that well and fired back, saying that England wasn't exactly something to be proud of either. According to him, the only thing England would win was a global competition for disgusting food. Cecilia disagreed and said England had plenty of delicious dishes. She got irritated that Ichika was insulting her country. Eventually, Cecilia challenged Ichika to a match and Ichika accepted. Cecilia warned him that if he threw the match on purpose, she'd make him her servant. Ichika then asked how much of a handicap he should give her. That made everyone laugh. They were surprised by how serious Ichika seemed, especially since many believed that men only had the upper hand until Infinite Stratos units were invented. Cecilia mocked Ichika, calling him a funny Japanese guy. One of the students suggested that he ask for a handicap, but Ichika said a man never takes back his word. Chifuryu then stepped in and scheduled the match between Ichika and Cecilia for Monday in Arena 3. She told both of them to get ready. That day, Chifuryu informed Ichika that his Infinite Stratos unit needed more time before it could be used, and since there were no spare units available, the school had decided to build one specifically for him. Upon hearing this, the other students felt quite envious. They wished they could have their own personalized Infinite Stratos as well. Ichika wondered if having a personal unit was really that impressive. Cecilia expressed her delight at the news, saying it pretty much guaranteed the winner of the upcoming representative tournament. From her point of view, it wouldn't be fair if she used a personal Infinite Stratos while Ichika had to rely on a training unit. This surprised Ichika, who had just learned that Cecilia also had her own personal unit. Cecilia explained that as a representative of the United Kingdom, she'd been granted one. She also mentioned that only 467 Infinite Stratos units existed in the world, and only the elite among the elite were given personal ones. Ichika was shocked to hear that there were only 467 units. Shizune stepped in to explain that the core technology inside each Infinite Stratos had never been made public. That was why only 467 existed. All the cores had been created by Professor Thabane, Haoki's older sister. The core technology remained a complete mystery, and no one other than Professor Thabane had been able to replicate it. Unfortunately, Thabane had refused to produce more than the original set. Because of this, countries, companies, and organizations had to make do with the limited number of cores available to them for research and development. Chifuryu then explained that personal Infinite Stratos units were normally only given to those working for governments or owned by major corporations. However, due to Ichika's unique status, he would be receiving a personal unit for data collection purposes. Shizune asked Chifuryu if Haoki was really related to Thabane, and Chifuryu confirmed that Haoki was her younger sister. The students were shocked. They had a hard time believing it, especially since Professor Thabane had gone missing and was being sought after by several countries and organizations. Naturally, they asked Haoki if she knew where Thabane was. With a sharp tone, Haoki responded that she had no idea where Thabane had gone. And honestly, she didn't care. Haoki made it clear that she was not her sister, and there was nothing she could tell them. At that point, Chifuryu instructed Maya to begin the lesson. Ichika couldn't help but wonder if something was off in Haoki's relationship with her older sister. During the lesson, Maya explained that Infinite Stratos units protect their pilots using a special energy shield. Each unit possesses something similar to a consciousness, allowing them to communicate with their pilot. Over time, the unit would gradually become more familiar with the pilot's thought patterns. While Maya was giving this explanation, Ichika couldn't understand a word and kept glancing at Haoki from time to time. Maya told the class to think of their Infinite Stratos unit as a partner. Yuko then asked if by partner, she meant something like a romantic relationship. Maya wasn't sure. She admitted she didn't have the experience to answer and that she was curious about it herself. At that moment, Ichika finally realized what it was like to attend an all-girls school. During lunch break, Ichika invited Haoki to eat together, but she ignored him. So he invited a few other classmates instead. Yuko, Hane, and Nagi happily accepted. Ichika said it would be more fun to get along with classmates, but Haoki still refused to join. Ichika tried to tug her along, but she resisted. Jokingly, Ichika teased that if she wouldn't walk, he might have to carry her. Haoki looked visibly upset and suddenly threw Ichika to the ground, which surprised the surrounding students. Ichika commented that Haoki had gotten even stronger, but Haoki shot back saying that Ichika was just getting weaker. According to her, what she had just done was simply a new trick she had picked up from her kendo training. Naji, Hane, and Yuko quickly left the area, clearly intimidated by what they had just seen. Ichika then grabbed Haoki's arm and insisted they eat lunch together, and after some hesitation, Haoki agreed. When they got to the cafeteria, Ichika gently told her not to be so self-centered all the time, which confused Haoki. He explained that what was actually on his mind was her. Ichika reminded her that he had been taken care of by Haoki's family, and since they were childhood friends who trained in the same martial art, it was only natural that he cared about her. After that, they started looking for an empty table to sit and eat together. While they were eating, Ichika asked Haoki to teach him more about Infinite Stratos. He admitted that if things kept going the way they were, he would probably lose to Cecilia without even putting up a fight. Haoki, however, blamed Ichika for getting himself into that kind of trouble. Ichika even went as far as pleading with her to help. Just then, a senior student from Class 3 approached and offered to teach Ichika about Infinite Stratos. She mentioned she knew he was still a beginner, and that he was scheduled to fight Cecilia soon. Haoki quickly stepped in and declared that she would be the one to train Ichika. The senior scoffed, saying that Haoki was just her first year, while she was already in her third year. But Haoki calmly replied that she was Thabana's younger sister, so that it shouldn't be a problem. Hearing that, the senior backed off and left. Ichika felt relieved and thankful that Haoki agreed to help him. Later that day, Ichika and Haoki were practicing kendo together, but Ichika was struggling to keep up. Haoki was confused about why Ichika was performing so poorly and asked what club he had joined during middle school. Ichika confessed that he went straight home every day and had missed a single day of school for 3 years. Haoki decided she would retrain him from the beginning, saying that this issue was more urgent than Infinite Stratos itself. She told Ichika she would train him for 3 hours after school every day. Although Ichika said he still needed to learn about Infinite Stratos, Haoki insisted that his current condition was way more serious. A few nearby students even began to doubt whether someone as unskilled as Ichika could actually control an Infinite Stratos unit. After training, Haoki started questioning whether she had been too harsh on Ichika. Still, she convinced herself that she had done the right thing, especially since he hadn't picked up a kendo sword in over a year. In her eyes, Ichika had changed a lot during the 6 years they had been apart. Determined to help him, Haoki made up her mind to continue training Ichika every day after school. That way, she could also spend more time with him. But then she grew embarrassed by her own thoughts and brushed them aside, trying to convince herself that she was doing all of this simply out of frustration with someone who wasn't taking martial arts seriously. A week later, the Infinite Stratos match between Ichika and Cecilia was about to begin. Ichika turned to Haoki and asked why she hadn't taught him anything about Infinite Stratos during their week of training. They had only practiced kendo the entire time. Haoki looked away and said that the unit Ichika was supposed to use hadn't been available yet. Ichika pointed out that she still could have explained the theory or gone over some basics, but Haoki just kept avoiding eye contact. At that moment, they were watching Cecilia's personal Infinite Stratos unit on the monitor. Soon after, Maya came in and announced that Ichika's own unit was ready. Shifuyu instructed him to get in immediately, noting that they didn't have much time. She urged him to start learning how to move during combat right away. Then Ichika's personal Infinite Stratos unit was revealed. It was called Byakushiki. Shifuyu told him to suit up immediately and begin adjusting to how it moved in battle. Ichika reached out and touched Byakushiki, and right away something felt different compared to the first time he had ever come into contact with an Infinite Stratos. As his hand rested on it, he began to understand what it was and why it existed. He also started to connect with it on a deeper level. Shifuyu asked him to relax his back as if he were sitting down, since the system would automatically adjust itself to him. Byakushiki then began to boot up and access its system. Maya provided some background information explaining that Cecilia's Infinite Stratos was called Blue Tears. Blue Tears was designed for long-range combat, while Byakushiki was equipped with a feature called Absolute Defense. This meant it was built to protect its pilot at all costs against any kind of attack. However, activating this feature would consume a large amount of shield energy. Ichika was ready for his match against Cecilia. He headed straight to the battle arena. Cecilia was already waiting, and with her usual arrogance declared that she would give him a chance to surrender and apologize. Of course, Ichika refused. Cecilia immediately fired at him, landing a direct hit on Byakushiki's shoulder. The audience was stunned. Ichika realized that it felt like he couldn't keep up with Byakushiki's speed. Cecilia kept firing and Ichika did his best to dodge her attacks. Each shot from her kept reducing Byakushiki's shield energy. At that moment, it became clear that Byakushiki only had one weapon and Ichika decided to use it. Cecilia mocked him, calling him foolish for choosing to fight her using a close-range weapon. The students watching the match kept cheering with excitement, while Haoki looked deeply worried about Ichika. Cecilia admitted that Ichika was the first person who had managed to last that long in a debut match against her Blue Tears. She continued to attack, but Ichika kept dodging and closing the distance between them, which made Cecilia nervous. Ichika figured out that Cecilia's weapons were controlled by her commands, and while she was actively using those weapons, she couldn't switch to another type of attack at the same time. Maya commented that Ichika was truly impressive, even saying it was hard to believe this was only his second time activating an Infinite Stratos. However, Shifuyu felt Ichika might be getting too confident. She noticed that he kept moving his left hand, a habit he usually displayed when he had made a small mistake. At that point, Haoki was visibly worried about him. There were only 2 shots left coming at Ichika. He knew Cecilia was keeping her distance, but he also believed that he had the upper hand if the fight came down to close combat. Unfortunately, Cecilia still had another attack left and quickly launched it. The hit looked like it struck him directly, but Byakushiki suddenly shifted form and shielded Ichika. Everyone watching was shocked as Ichika's Infinite Stratos transformed. A system notification appeared in front of Ichika, letting him know that a change had occurred. Cecilia was surprised to learn that Ichika had been fighting in default configuration mode the entire time. Ichika didn't fully understand what was going on, but in that moment, he felt like Byakushiki had finally become truly his. Byakushiki then revealed a new weapon, Yukira Type 2, the same type used by Chifuyu. Ichika acknowledged himself that he had the most amazing older sister in the world, but he also knew it was time to stop relying on her to protect him all the time. From now on, he had to protect his family too. To start, he had to defend her reputation because in his eyes, Shifuyu wouldn't look cool if her little brother ended up being a loser. Frustrated, Cecilia launched a barrage of shots at him, but Ichika deflected them with ease and quickly closed in for a close-range attack. Just before his Yukira could strike her, Byakushiki's shield energy finally ran out, meaning the match had come to an end. As a result, the winner was declared to be Cecilia. The announcement shocked the audience, who had been captivated by the intense match. After the match, Ichika met with Shifuyu and asked why he had lost. Shifuyu explained that it was because Ichika had used an anti-shield attack, which happened as a result of fighting without fully understanding the function of his weapon. Ichika then asked what exactly an anti-shield attack was. Shifuyu told him that an attack capable of penetrating the enemy's shield and directly hitting the pilot was a special ability of Yukira. In fact, she added, Yukira's attacks drained Byakushiki's energy in order to be executed. That weapon, she revealed, had been the key to her victory in the first Mondo Grosso. Hearing this helped Ichika understand why Byakushiki's shield energy had been depleted. Maya explained that an Infinite Stratos battle ends when one side runs out of shield energy. The anti-shield ability could defeat an opponent by draining the user's own shield energy, making it a double-edged sword. Shifuyu pointed out that in other words, Ichika's Infinite Stratos had its flaws. No was ever perfect, each one came with its own drawbacks. However, Ichika's had a stronger offensive capability compared to the others. At that time, Byakushiki was in standby mode, but it could activate at any moment if Ichika called for it. Maya handed Ichika the Infinite Stratos manual and asked him to read through it. After that, Ichika walked alongside Haoki. He was curious why she was staring at him. Haoki said losing was more frustrating than she expected and mentioned that starting tomorrow, they would begin training with their own Infinite Stratos units. She asked if Ichika wanted her to teach him. Ichika admitted he felt more at ease around Haoki than with any of the other girls, not only because she was the band's younger sister, but also because he believed she knew a lot about Infinite Stratos. Hearing this made Haoki a bit flustered, but she agreed to help and told him to make some time during the day starting tomorrow so she could teach him. Meanwhile, Cecilia was taking a bath, still thinking about the match earlier. The emotions she felt weren't exactly pleasant. Even though she had technically won the match, she had to admit that Ichika's abilities were impressive. That day, the students of Class 101 at Infinite Stratos High School were about to start their basic air movement training with their Infinite Stratos units. Shifuyu asked Ichika and Cecilia to demonstrate first. Cecilia stepped up right away and effortlessly activated her Infinite Stratos from the earring she wore. Ichika followed but seemed to have some trouble. Shifuyu pointed out that it should take less than a second for a pilot to activate their unit. Ichika focused, and after a short delay, he finally managed to activate Byakushiki. Afterward, Shifuyu instructed both Ichika and Cecilia to take flight. Cecilia soared through the air with impressive speed, while Ichika followed behind her. Shifuyu commented that Ichika was too slow. According to her, Byakushiki should have been faster than Cecilia's unit based on its specs. Ichika looked confused. He thought he had already imagined how to control it. However, Cecilia told him that simply imagining it was not enough. It would be better if he tried to find a method that truly worked for him. Ichika admitted that he did not fully understand how to fly and wasn't even sure how his own unit was able to fly at all. Hearing that, Cecilia offered to help him after school. Not long after, Chifuryu instructed them to dive and come to a quick stop. Cecilia executed the maneuver flawlessly. Ichika admitted she was amazing and gave it a try himself. However, as he attempted to land, Ichika lost control and crashed to the ground. Haoki, Maya, and Chifuryu quickly rushed to check on him. Ichika said he was in pain and Haoki looked relieved that he was okay. Chifuryu, however, was puzzled about what Ichika had done to leave such a hole in the ground. Ichika apologized while Haoki expressed her disappointment that he had not mastered anything she had tried to teach him. Suddenly, Cecilia came over to check on him, surprising Ichika with her concern. Cecilia was relieved he was safe and suggested that he go to the student infirmary just to be sure. Haoki disagreed, saying that because Ichika had been using an infinite Stratos, he wouldn't get hurt that easily. Cecilia responded that worrying about others was only natural. The two of them then started arguing, criticizing each other in front of everyone. Ichika was baffled about why they could never seem to get along. The next day, Class 1-1 held a small celebration for Ichika, who had been chosen as their class representative. Ichika was confused about why he had been selected. It turned out that Cecilia had declined the position. Although Ichika had lost their match, she believed that he deserved the role because he had managed to challenge her properly. She had reflected on her behavior that day and realized it caused too much chaos, and chose to step back so Ichika could take the spot instead. Their classmates agreed and even said that as the only boy in class, Ichika should be pampered. Haoki, standing nearby, looked annoyed by how popular Ichika had become. Ichika noticed for scowling and wondered what was bothering her. Suddenly, a student from the journalism club named Karuko appeared and snapped a photo of Ichika. She asked to take a picture of him and Cecilia together. Since they were a well-known duo, both having personal Infinite Stratos units, Karuko even requested them to pose with a handshake. Cecilia looked delighted and asked if she could get a copy of the photo as well. Karuko promised she would send her one. As they stood side by side and leaned in slightly for the shot, Haoki could be seen frowning nearby. Right as Karuko prepared to take the picture, all the other students suddenly joined in, crowding the frame. Cecilia was visibly annoyed. They had all jumped in to prevent her from getting a solo shot with Ichika. That night in their dorm room, Haoki mentioned that Ichika must have enjoyed the day. Ichika admitted he was exhausted and asked if she would enjoy being in his position. Haoki frowned and threw a pillow at him. Ichika was confused by her reaction. She said she wanted to change into her sleepwear and asked him to turn around. Ichika suggested that next time she should change while he was brushing his teeth. Haoki quickly pulled the curtain between their beds and changed clothes. Meanwhile, Ichika, nervously aware of what was happening, sat still until Haoki finished putting on her kimono. When she was done, Ichika noticed the sash she was wearing and commented that it looked new. Haoki didn't expect Ichika to be that observant, but of course he had noticed. He looked at Haoki every single day. That night, Haoki invited Ichika to go to sleep and turned off the lights in the room. Before they dozed off, she apologized to him for being so difficult lately. Ichika told her it didn't bother him at all. The next day in class, the students were buzzing with news that the class representative of 1-2 had been replaced because of a transfer student. Yuko mentioned that the new student came from China. With full confidence, Cecilia guessed that they were probably looking for someone strong enough to compete with her. Ichika became curious. Was this new student really that powerful? Shizune didn't think so. She said it was unlikely because only students from classes 1-1 and 1-4 had personal Infinite Stratos units. But just then, the girl entered the classroom announcing that the new class 1-2 representative did in fact have her own IS, so class 1-1 wasn't going to win that easily. To Ichika's surprise, he recognized her. The girl's name was Lingyan, and she was the transfer student from China. Lingyan stepped forward and boldly declared the challenge to the class. Cecilia couldn't believe how casually Lingyan was acting around Ichika. Ichika, confused by her behavior, asked why she was trying so hard to act cool. That wasn't like her at all. Lingyan got annoyed, but before things escalated, Chifuryu suddenly knocked her lightly on the head and reminded her that it was time for homeroom. She told Lingyan to head back to her own classroom so she wouldn't cause a distraction 1-1. Lingyan left reluctantly, clearly not finished with Ichika just yet. Later during lunch in the cafeteria, Ichika ran into Lingyan again. He was still surprised that she had become her country's representative and now stood in for class 1-2. He asked why she hadn't told him beforehand. Lingyan said that if she had told him in advance, their reunion wouldn't have been nearly as dramatic. Ichika then asked if she still felt awkward around Chifuryu. Lingyan admitted that it wasn't awkward, they just didn't get along very well. As she ordered a bowl of ramen, Ichika wasn't surprised at all. She had always loved ramen. He asked how she had been during the year they hadn't seen each other. The other students from class 1-1 started to get irritated watching Ichika and Lingyan chatting so closely. They kept glancing over at the two of them, obviously not pleased. Ichika asked when Lingyan had become her country's representative. She said she was shocked when she first saw Ichika on the news. Ichika himself couldn't believe he had ended up at Infinite Stratos either. Lingyan mentioned that she had heard about what happened during Ichika's entrance exam, how he had accidentally activated an Infinite Stratos. She asked how that even happened. Ichika explained that the entrance test was held in a building with lots of rooms. He got lost and tried to ask the staff for help, but didn't understand their directions. He ended up wandering around until he stumbled into a room with an IS unit inside. Out of curiosity, he touched it, and to everyone's shock, it activated. Moments later, people rushed in and told him he wasn't supposed to be there. Since men aren't supposed to be able to operate as units, they were stunned when they realized the machine had responded to him. A lot happened after that, and eventually, Ichika was admitted to Infinite Stratos Academy. Lingyan was surprised to hear how it all unfolded. Then, out of nowhere, Haoki and Cecilia showed up. They wanted to make sure, was Ichika dating Lingyan? Lingyan was caught off guard, and Ichika quickly explained that they were just childhood friends. He added that Lingyan had transferred away not long after Haoki had left their school. Ichika introduced Haoki to Lingyan, explaining that Haoki was his first childhood friend and Lingyan was the second. That made Haoki genuinely happy. She felt valued by Ichika. Lingyan then greeted Haoki and said she hoped they could get along from now on. Cecilia introduced herself as the representative from the United Kingdom. She also shared that she and Ichika had competed for the position of class representative. Unfortunately, while Cecilia was explaining all this in detail, Lingyan completely ignored her, which made Cecilia visibly annoyed. Instead of responding, Lingyan invited Ichika to train with her. She openly admitted that she wasn't interested in anything Cecilia was saying, which only made Cecilia angrier. At that moment, Haoki stepped in and mentioned that helping Ichika train had become her responsibility. Cecilia responded by saying she didn't need any help from someone from a rival class, but Lingyan said she simply wanted to talk to Ichika and suggested that the two of them should leave together. Cecilia was clearly irritated and called Lingyan arrogant, especially since she had joined later than the rest. However, Lingyan pointed out that she had known Ichika longer than Cecilia had. Not wanting to be outdone, Haoki claimed that she had actually known Ichika the longest and even mentioned that he used to come over to her house for meals. Lingyan then revealed that Ichika had also frequently come to her house for meals back in their grade school days. Haoki and Cecilia immediately turned to Ichika, asking for an explanation. Ichika clarified that he had only eaten at Lingyan's family restaurant. Haoki and Cecilia were relieved to hear that the place he visited was just a restaurant owned by Lingyan's family. Ichika then asked how Lingyan's father was doing, and she said he was doing well. After that, Lingyan said she would see him again after finishing her training and walked away. After school, Ichika trained in Infinite Stratos with Haoki. Haoki had recently been granted permission to use an Infinite Stratos unit for training purposes, and starting that day, she would be the one helping Ichika train. The unit Haoki used was called Uchigen, a mass-produced Japanese model. Cecilia was surprised that Haoki had received approval that easily. Haoki told Ichika to start a long-range battle with her, and he immediately drew his sword. Just then, Cecilia activated her own Infinite Stratos and said that she would be the one to train him instead. The training continued into the evening. After they finished, Ichika felt completely exhausted. Haoki remarked that it was no surprise since he rarely exercised. Ichika admitted that the fatigue came from having to fight against two people. Haoki then walked off and invited Ichika to head back to the dorms. Ichika asked her to go ahead, as he still couldn't move his body properly. Haoki agreed and left first, mentioning that she needed to shower. Still resting, Ichika thought about how this kind of training would probably continue until the upcoming class battle. Not long after, Lingyan showed up and offered him a sports drink. Ichika hadn't expected her to be waiting for him. Lingyan seemed relieved to have a moment alone with him and asked whether he had felt lonely without her around. Ichika admitted that losing a friend would definitely make him feel lonely, but that wasn't quite what Lingyan meant. She thought Ichika might want to talk to her about something deeper, especially since she was a childhood friend who had suddenly come back into his life. Instead, Ichika asked whether she had contacted any of their old middle school friends, saying they would be happy to hear she had returned. That clearly wasn't the response Lingyan was hoping for. Ichika didn't continue the conversation and said he wanted to go back to his room, thinking Haoki was probably done showering. Lingyan then asked what kind of relationship he had with Haoki. Ichika explained that Haoki was his first childhood friend and Lingyan was the second. Confused, Lingyan asked what childhood friends had to do with taking a shower. Ichika explained that he was sharing a room with Haoki because the school couldn't arrange a separate room for him. He added that he was actually thankful to be sharing a room with someone he already knew. Otherwise, he might have had trouble sleeping due to nerves. Hearing this, Lingyan grew quiet. Then, all of a sudden, she asked Haoki to switch rooms with her. Haoki, clearly confused, asked why they needed to switch rooms in the first place. Lingyan was convinced that Haoki would definitely not be comfortable sharing a room with a guy. Haoki admitted that she never said anything like that, especially regarding her situation with Ichika. Lingyan told her not to worry because she and Ichika were childhood friends. Ichika, of course, didn't want to get involved in that matter. Still, Haoki refused to switch rooms and firmly told Lingyan to go back to hers. Lingyan then asked Ichika if he remembered the promise they made back in grade school. Haoki became annoyed because Lingyan ignored what she had just said. She quickly drew her kendo sword toward Lingyan. In response, Lingyan activated part of her arm to block it. Lingyan pointed out that Haoki's strike could have been dangerous if her opponent wasn't protected. Haoki then put her sword away, and Ichika and Lingyan continued discussing the promise they had mentioned earlier. Ichika thought the promise was about Lingyan saying she would cook sweet and sour pork for him every day if he said she was good at cooking. To him, that kind of deal sounded great, like getting treated to food every day, which was perfect for a single guy. Lingyan immediately slapped him and called him rude for forgetting a promise he made to a girl. Ichika was confused about why she was so mad. Lingyan was upset because Ichika misunderstood the meaning of that promise. When Ichika asked her to explain what it actually meant, she couldn't bring herself to say it directly. Instead, she proposed that whoever won the class versus class match next week could ask the loser for one favor. Ichika agreed. If he wanted, she had to tell him what the promise really meant. After that, Lingyan walked away and Haoki looked annoyed at Ichika. That day was the day of the class versus class match. In the first round, Class 1-1, represented by Ichika, would face Class 1-2, represented by Lingyan. Lingyan's Infinite Stratos was called Shenlong, which was a close combat type, similar to Ichika's Byakushiki. Cecilia reminded Ichika not to drop his guard. Haoki told him to stay calm and assured him that if he fought like he did during training, he would win. Before long, Ichika and Lingyan headed to the arena. Right before the match began, Lingyan told Ichika that if he apologized for what happened, she would go easy on him. Ichika refused and told her to just come at him with everything she had. Lingyan warned him that a supposedly invincible is like Byakushiki wasn't truly perfect. With enough power to surpass its shield, someone could injure their opponent without needing to defeat them entirely. Shortly after, the match between Ichika and Lingyan began. That day, an interclass match was being held. In the first round, Ichika represented Class 1-1 and faced off against Lingyan from Class 1-2. Lingyan quickly drew her sword and launched it toward Ichika, but he managed to block the attack. Lingyan praised him for being able to stop her first move. Without wasting a moment, Lingyan duplicated her swords and launched another assault. Ichika did his best to block her attack, pushing himself to the limit, which fired up the crowd with excitement. Haoki was watching from the monitor room alongside Cecilia, Chifuyu, and Maya. Haoki looked genuinely worried about Ichika's condition, while Cecilia seemed confused about what he was doing. She urged him to use the cross-grid turn maneuver that she had taught him earlier. At that moment, Lingyan fused her two swords and spun them around, preparing for another strike. All Ichika could do was wait for the right moment and dodge slightly. Lingyan fired a cannon blast that only grazed him, but before he could react again, she unleashed another shot, which sent Ichika crashing to the ground. Haoki was shocked by the sudden attack. Maya explained that Lingyan had just used a pressure cannon. That weapon gathers compressed air and shoots it out like a bullet. It turned out that Lingyan's Infinite Stratos was a third-generation unit, just like Cecilia's Blue Tears. Ichika tried to get back on his feet, but Lingyan kept firing at him repeatedly. He managed to dodge the incoming shots skillfully, even though the dragon cannon's bullets were invisible to the naked eye. Maya suspected that the cannon didn't have a fixed firing angle, meaning it had almost no blind spots. At that point, Ichika realized he needed to take the offensive or else Lingyan would eventually overpower him. He planned to use the same weapon that Chifuyu had once used. During a previous training session, Ichika had asked if Yukira was the only weapon compatible with Byakushiki. According to Chifuyu, it was all he needed to win. One clean strike would be enough. Ichika had told her not to compare him to a world champion. Chifuyu believed that a beginner like Ichika wouldn't survive a long-range battle. She explained that fighting from a distance meant he had to factor in recoil control, shot trajectory, range estimation, quick stops, absolute rotation, as well as weapon characteristics, air pressure, enemy shield types, and more. Ichika was overwhelmed by how much she listed. Chifuyu had pointed out that Ichika was better off focusing on one thing at a time since he was her younger brother. Back in the match, Ichika planned to launch a shield-breaking attack and believed he could pull it off. He called out to Lingyan and told her that from that moment on, he would fight her seriously. Lingyan looked thrilled to hear that. Ichika took off at full speed, hoping Lingyan would chase him. Meanwhile, Maya, who was still observing the match, suspected that Ichika had a plan. Chifuyu confirmed it, saying he was probably about to use Ignition Boost, something she had taught him herself. Ignition Boost was a surprise maneuver that dramatically increased his speed, allowing him to close the distance with his opponent. If the timing was perfect, he could win the match, but it could only be used once. Lingyan kept attacking, firing shot after shot. Ichika increased his speed to dodge them all. When he finally got close enough, he used the Yukira sword. The attack was powerful enough to damage the arena's shield system and trigger a huge explosion. Everyone watching was stunned, unsure of what just happened. Some even thought it was an earthquake. Haoki looked deeply worried about Ichika. Maya quickly reported that there had been structural damage and that it seemed like someone had breached the protective shield. Chifuyu announced that the match was over and ordered both Lingyan and Ichika to stand down immediately. The crowd panicked and people began running for safety. Ichika didn't understand what was happening. Lingyan contacted him to say the match had been cancelled, and she invited him to return to the base with her. Suddenly, an alert went off. An unidentified Infinite Stratos had locked onto a target, and that target was Ichika. Lingyan panicked and told Ichika to head back while she bought him some time. She urged him to escape right away, but Ichika refused to leave a girl behind in such a dangerous situation. Lingyan told him that she was stronger than he was, so he needed to go. She also said she had no intention of fighting until the end, believing the teachers would arrive soon to take care of the threat. Suddenly, a cannon blast was fired toward Lingyan, but fortunately, Ichika quickly jumped in and saved her. The cannon attack was far more powerful than anything Cecilia had ever launched. Lingyan felt deeply embarrassed because Ichika had lifted her up in his arms and she started hitting him in protest, trying to get him to put her down. Before long, the attack came again. From the explosion emerged an unidentified Infinite Stratos unit. Ichika tried to ask what its intentions were, but there was no response. Shortly after, Maya contacted Ichika, urging him to leave the area immediately. She explained that the teachers were on their way with their own Infinite Stratos units to deal with the situation. However, Ichika refused and said he would hold off the attacker until all the students had evacuated. Maya strongly advised against that, but Ichika insisted. He asked Lingyan to get ready to fight. Still feeling flustered after being carried, Lingyan continued to squirm and demanded that Ichika let her go. The unidentified Infinite Stratos began bombarding them with rapid fire. Lingyan remarked that whoever was piloting it seemed extremely enthusiastic. She then told Ichika to charge at the enemy with Yukihira, while she would provide support. They got ready to execute the plan. The unknown unit aimed at Lingyan, who fired back with her own cannon. The two engaged in an intense exchange, flying higher and higher into the sky. During the battle, Maya kept trying to contact Ichika and Lingyan, but there was no response. Chifuyu, observing the situation, told Maya to leave them be. After all, they had volunteered to fight. Maya wondered if Chifuyu wasn't worried, but Chifuyu calmly advised her to stay composed and have some coffee. As she stirred her cup, she accidentally added salt instead of sugar. Maya, Haoki, Cecilia, and Chifuyu continued monitoring the battle from the control room. Seeing how dangerous things looked, Cecilia asked Chifuyu for permission to deploy her Infinite Stratos so she could assist Ichika and Lingyan. But unfortunately, the area's security level had been raised to level 4, and all the doors had been locked. They suspected the unidentified was behind the lockdown, which meant Ichika and Lingyan couldn't escape, and no one could go in to help them. The battle raged on. Ichika took a heavy hit from the unknown unit. Meanwhile, the students inside couldn't get out due to the locked doors. Cecilia suggested contacting the government to declare a state of emergency. Chifuyu told her that it had already been done, and some of the third-year students were currently trying to break through the system. If they managed to override the lockdown, reinforcements could be sent in. Cecilia, feeling helpless, realized all she could do was wait. Chifuyu pointed out that Cecilia wasn't technically suited for backup. Blue Tears was optimized for solo combat against multiple targets. In a team setting, Cecilia could potentially be more of a hindrance than a help. Cecilia was clearly offended by that, but Chifuyu challenged her by asking whether she had ever done any team coordination drills. What was her role in a group strategy? What did her team attacks look like in simulations? What kind of enemy strength had she faced, and how long could she stay active? Cecilia couldn't come up with an answer. Haoki kept watching Ichika's movements on the monitor. At that moment, Lingyan managed to land a hit on the unidentified and Ichika moved in to follow up with a strike. But something was off. He was struggling. Lingyan couldn't understand why Ichika wasn't hitting the target properly, especially since this was the 4th time they had attempted their coordinated attack. By that point, the shield energy of Byakushiki was running dangerously low. Ichika only had enough power left to use his shield-piercing attack one more time. The unidentified Infinite Stratos continued to rain down gunfire on them, and all they could do was dodge. Lingyan said they couldn't beat the opponent without a solid plan. Ichika told Lingyan to run, but she firmly refused. As a national representative, she couldn't just leave him behind. Ichika then asked her to cover him from the rear. Hearing that, Lingyan became flustered and embarrassed, so much so that she almost got hit by an incoming attack. The unknown Infinite Stratos kept firing at them, and the two tried their best to dodge the relentless assault. Suddenly, the machine halted. Ichika suspected that the might be unmanned. At first, Lingyan didn't believe him. But as she thought about it, she realized that the never attacked when they were speaking, almost as if it was listening in on their conversation. Even then, Lingyan was skeptical. To her knowledge, all IS units were designed to be operated by a pilot. An unmanned version shouldn't even exist. Ichika then posed a question. What if the IS really didn't have a pilot? Lingyan asked if he thought he could win in that case. Ichika replied that if it was truly unmanned, then he wouldn't have to hold back. Meanwhile, Hoki tried to break out of the building to help Ichika. At that moment, Ichika considered using his Yukira Type 2's most powerful attack, Riryaku Byakuya. According to him, the weapon was far too strong to be used during training or practice battles. But if he was up against a pilotless IS, then there would be no need to hold back. Unfortunately, Lingyan pointed out that none of Ichika's attacks had landed so far. Ichika promised that this time his strike would hit its target. He asked Lingyan to fire her cannon at full power toward the enemy once he gave the signal. Just as Ichika was about to move, Haoki suddenly shouted for him to defeat the machine. The unknown IS immediately turned its attention to her and began charging its weapon. Ichika quickly told Haoki to run and at the same time instructed Lingyan to carry out their plan. He then asked Lingyan to shoot at him. When her cannon fired in his direction, Ichika absorbed the transformation energy and dashed forward, unleashing a full-powered slash at the IS. He did it for Chifuryu, Haoki, Lingyan, and everyone at the IS Academy. His attack landed successfully, but Ichika was hit hard in the process. As the enemy machine began to weaken, it slowly approached the unconscious Ichika lying on the ground. Just as it got close, a long-range shot blasted it away. It was Cecilia. Haoki was shocked. She hadn't even realized Cecilia had arrived. Ichika asked Cecilia to finish it off. With her long-range attack, she managed to take it down. Ichika told her he knew she could do it, and Cecilia's face turned red with embarrassment after hearing his praise. Suddenly, an alert blared. The enemy was reactivating. IS stood back up and aimed its weapon again. Without hesitation, Ichika charged forward to strike it head-on. After the battle, Ichika lost consciousness and was taken to the student infirmary. Lingyan stayed by his side. While sitting next to him, she leaned in slowly, about to kiss him. But just as she got close, Ichika suddenly opened his eyes, surprising her and stopping her in her tracks. He asked why she was there and why she looked so flustered. Embarrassed, Lingyan denied being panicked. Ichika then asked about the unknown IS. Lingyan told him that it was no longer moving and reassured him that he was the only one injured. Suddenly, Ichika brought up a memory. They once talked about sweet and sour pork at sunset. Back then, Lingyan told him that if she ever became a great cook, she wanted him to eat her sweet and sour pork every single day. Ichika then asked what she really meant by that. He had honestly thought she was just offering him free food. Lingyan was surprised and mentioned that someone could get better at cooking if there was someone willing to eat their food. Ichika admitted that he wanted to try Lingyan's cooking, saying that her food tasted really good and he would love to eat it again. Lingyan then told him that her family's restaurant no longer existed. It turned out her parents had divorced, and that was the reason she had to return to China. Out of nowhere, Ichika invited Lingyan to hang out with him sometime. Lingyan began to wonder if he was asking her out on a date. Just then, Cecilia entered the student infirmary to check on Ichika. As soon as she saw Lingyan there, she got annoyed and reminded her that they had agreed not to make any moves on him until he was out of bed. Not long after, Hoki arrived as well, saying that Cecilia had cut in line before her. Lingyan, clearly irritated, told both of them to leave, saying that Ichika was her childhood friend. Despite that, they continued arguing over him. Ichika then asked where Chifuryu was. None of them knew, even though she had been with them earlier. Meanwhile, Chifuryu and Maya were investigating an unidentified Infinite Stratos unit that had been detected without a pilot. Its core hadn't been registered. There were only 467 known cores in the world, but this unit wasn't among them. Maya couldn't understand how that was even possible. That day, Ichika was hanging out with Don and told him that he was currently attending a school where all the students were girls. Don figured that must be pretty fun. Ichika said he was really glad that Lingyan had also enrolled in the same school, since it gave him someone to talk to. He admitted that it was tough not having anyone to chat with most of the time. Not long after, Don's younger sister Ron walked in to let him know that lunch was ready. She was surprised to see Ichika in Don's room, and Ichika greeted her casually. Ron quickly adjusted her clothes, clearly unaware that Ichika was there. Since Ichika had a day off from school, he had stopped by Don's place after returning home. Don reminded Ron to knock before entering someone else's room. Ron quickly told her older brother to stop talking so carelessly in front of Ichika. That day, Ichika ended up eating at Don's family restaurant. Ron encouraged him not to feel shy around her. Ichika noticed that Ron was dressed quite neatly and asked if she was heading out, maybe even going on a date, but Ron quickly denied it. Seeing how casual Ichika was, Don guessed that he probably acted the same way at school and felt kind of sorry for Lingyan. Later that evening, back at the dorm, Maya came to visit the room Ichika shared with Haoki. She informed them that room arrangements had been finalized and that Hoki would need to move out. Haoki was surprised and asked if she had to move immediately. Maya explained that the school couldn't allow male and female students to stay in the same room for that long, and she also believed that there was no way they had been able to relax the entire time. Ichika told Haoki not to worry about him. He even commented with a grin that waking up without her in the room might actually be refreshing. Hearing that, Haoki looked visibly annoyed and said she was ready to move out right away. Ichika was confused about why she seemed so irritated, but decided not to dwell on it. A short while later, Haoki knocked on Ichika's door. Ichika thought maybe she had left something behind, but it turned out she wanted to talk to him about an upcoming one-on-one match. She told Ichika that if she won the match, she'd take him somewhere afterward. Unexpectedly, Nagi, Hane, and Yuko overheard the conversation and were thrilled by the news, thinking it would become the talk of the school. The next day, students in class were buzzing about the rumored one-on-one match happening next month, where the winner would supposedly get to go on a date with Ichika. Somehow, the story had gotten twisted, and it was no longer accurate. Yuko and Nagi were confused about how it had spread like that. That morning, Ichika entered the classroom and asked his classmates what rumors they were talking about, but no one wanted to tell him. A few moments later, Chifuyu entered the room to begin the lesson. Maya then announced that a new transfer student would be joining their class that day. Soon, a student entered and introduced himself at the front of the class. He said his name was Charles, and that he had come from France. He mentioned hearing that there was a guy at this school who looked just like him, so he decided to enroll at Infinite Stratos. The whole class erupted in excitement because another male student had joined them. Chifuyu quickly calmed everyone down and announced that Class 1-1 would be training with Class 1-2 that day. She told them all to change clothes and gather at the second field. She also asked Ichika to look after Charles. Charles greeted Ichika and introduced himself properly, but Ichika didn't respond right away because he was in a rush to get ready. He grabbed Charles by the hand and led him out of the classroom so the girls could change clothes. Ichika brought him to the locker room and was confused when Charles seemed to be shivering slightly. Suddenly, some of the girls blocked their way, clearly excited and impressed by both Ichika and Charles. Ichika quickly told Charles they needed to run. Charles was confused about why everyone was acting so wild, so Ichika explained that the reason was simple. He and Charles were the only boys in the entire Infinite Stratos school. They managed to make it to the locker room, and Charles apologized for being a hassle on his first day. But Ichika told him not to worry about it and actually thanked him. Having another guy around meant a lot, and Ichika hoped they could get along well. He then properly introduced himself to Charles. Before they knew it, they were almost late. Ichika quickly started changing clothes. As he took off his shirt, Charles immediately turned away and covered his face in surprise. Ichika asked Charles to change clothes quickly since their supervising teacher was very strict about being on time. Charles looked nervous and asked Ichika to turn around while she changed. Ichika was a bit puzzled about how Charles could change so quickly. He mentioned that he often had trouble wearing that kind of outfit because it was too tight and could get stuck. Charles's face turned red when she heard that. Ichika noted that her outfit looked really comfortable, and it turned out to be from the Duno Corporation, which belonged to her family. Her father was the director of that company, and according to her, it was probably the biggest Infinite Stratos manufacturer in France. Ichika wasn't surprised. Her refined aura and well-mannered behavior made sense if she was the daughter of a company director. Once all the students had gathered on the field, Chifuyu began the training session. First up was a demonstration battle. Chifuyu called on Lingyan and Cecilia to step forward since both of them had their own personal Infinite Stratos units that were ready to deploy. In truth, neither of them enjoyed being the center of attention, but Chifuyu encouraged them to show some energy since this was their chance to show off in front of the whole class. That immediately lit fire under them. They got excited and were ready to go. Cecilia and Lingyan were eager to fight each other, but to their surprise, their opponent turned out to be Maya. Suddenly, Maya activated her Infinite Stratos and accidentally fell from a height, landing on Ichika. Ichika ended up on top of her, and his hand accidentally touched her chest. Maya reminded Ichika that this wasn't something he should be doing, but if it kept happening, then Chifuyu would become her sister-in-law, and that wouldn't be too bad. Ichika quickly pulled his hand away, clearly flustered. Right after that, an energy blast from Cecilia nearly hit him. It turned out she had fired on purpose, clearly annoyed by what had just happened. Lingyan wasn't happy either. She threw both her swords at Ichika, but fortunately, Maya shot them down in time. She asked if Ichika was okay, and he thanked her for saving him. Chifuyu then explained to the students that Maya used to be a candidate to represent her country, and for her, dealing with attacks like that was nothing. Maya humbly stated that she was just a former candidate, nothing more. Chifuyu then instructed them to begin the match. Cecilia asked whether the battle would really be a 2-on-1 fight, and Lingyan expressed her concern too. Chifuyu reassured them not to worry. If Maya was using her full strength, they would likely lose regardless. Tralek gave the signal, and the battle began. Cecilia fired a series of shots at Maya, but she easily dodged them. Lingyan launched a cannon blast, but again, Maya avoided the explosion effortlessly. Meanwhile, Chief Ryu asked Charles to explain Maya's Infinite Stratos unit to the rest of the students. Charles explained that Maya was using the Rafale Revive developed by the Duno Corporation. It was one of the best second-generation Infinite Stratos units and could hold its own even against early third-generation models. Among the mass-produced units at the time, it was the most advanced and ranked as the third best-selling model. It was also highly versatile, capable of handling close-range combat, long-range attacks, and defense. Back in the fight, Maya continued to fire at Cecilia, who tried her best to dodge. In doing so, she ended up colliding with Lingyan. When the two of them were close together, Maya seized the opportunity and shot them both, knocking them out of the air. Cecilia was in disbelief as she had lost. She and Lingyan began blaming each other for the defeat. Chief Ryu stepped in and told them to show some respect to Maya, now that they had seen just how strong she really was. Afterward, Chief Ryu instructed the students to start training in groups, but leaders of each group would be the students who owned personal Infinite Stratos units. She asked them all to split up and form their groups. The students quickly moved to organize themselves. Lingyan reminded her group members to be careful and not to touch things recklessly, as someone might get hurt. Cecilia asked her group to board one at a time. Meanwhile, Haoki, who had secretly wanted to join Ichika's group, found herself annoyed by the fact that she was considered an elite even in moments like this. Ichika directed his group members to board in order, following their number sequence. The first in line was Kyoka, a girl from the handball club. She shared that she enjoyed watching sports and jogging. As she reached out to shake hands with Ichika, the rest of the group started to feel jealous. They quickly crowded around and offered to shake his hand too, all saying they had liked him since the first time they met. Apparently, Charles had experienced the same situation before as well. Kyoko was wearing her Infinite Stratos suit and tried walking slowly. She admitted that the training made her heart race. Ichika called the next person, and Haoki stepped forward, saying that she couldn't climb up to the control unit. Maya asked Ichika to help Haoki use Byakushiki to get her up there. Without hesitation, Ichika lifted Haoki and carried her up princess style. It was her first time being carried like that. Ichika asked her to activate the Infinite Stratos and start using it. Out of nowhere, Haoki asked whether Ichika had any plans during lunch. She then asked if they could eat together, and Ichika agreed. Unfortunately, the lunch Haoki had dreamed of sharing alone with Ichika turned out to be a group lunch with Charles, Cecilia, and Lingyan. Ichika felt that it would be more fun to eat together, especially since Charles had just transferred and still didn't know much about the school. Ichika, Cecilia, and Lingyan exchanged intense stares. Charles began to feel awkward being there with all of them, but Ichika reassured him that it was fine since they were both guys and also roommates. Charles thanked him, and Lingyan was curious why Ichika seemed flustered. At that moment, Lingyan brought out some sweet and sour pork she had made herself. She explained that she prepared it earlier that morning because Ichika had said he really wanted to try her cooking. Cecilia chimed in, saying she also woke up early to prepare something. She had made sandwiches, hoping to show that British food could taste great too. Ichika tried the sandwich first, but it seemed like he didn't quite enjoy the taste. He then turned his attention to Haoki's lunch. Haoki's bento looked luxurious. She admitted she had prepared it with care, originally intending to eat it by herself. Ichika tasted it and found it delicious, certain that she had put a lot of effort into making it. Haoki smiled and revealed that the dish was seasoned with ginger, soy sauce, grated onion, a bit of pepper, and a secret ingredient, grated radish. Ichika was clearly impressed by the flavor, and Cecilia and Lingyan started to look annoyed. Ichika asked why Haoki wasn't eating, and she told him that she had already eaten the failed batch. Seeing how happy she was that Ichika liked her cooking, he offered her a bite, feeding her directly. Haoki's face turned bright red as she accepted the bite. She admitted it was really good, though it wasn't just about the karage. Charles then commented that what they just did looked like something couples do, feeding each other. She said the two of them looked very close. Lingyan and Cecilia didn't seem too happy to hear that. Charles then suggested that they all share their lunches and feed each other, saying there was nothing wrong with that. Ichika agreed, and so did Lingyan. Cecilia, although usually opposed to anything outside of proper table manners, said she should probably follow Japanese customs in this case. Lingyan then offered her sweet and sour pork to Ichika, and Cecilia also moved to feed him her sandwich. Later that night, Ichika and Charles were chatting in their room. Charles asked why Ichika trained with the Infinite Stratos after school. Ichika explained that he needed the extra practice because he had fallen behind the others. Charles said she wanted to join in as well, especially since she had her own personal Infinite Stratos and could possibly be of help. Ichika happily agreed. The next day at school, Maya brought more exciting news. Another transfer student had joined Class 1-1. This new student was from Germany and her name was Laura. The class was surprised since it was the second day in a row they had a transfer student. Maya asked everyone to stay calm because Laura hadn't finished introducing herself yet. Chifuyu then asked Laura to introduce herself properly. Laura addressed Chifuyu as coach, which led Ichika to guess that she must have known Chifuyu from her time in Germany. After her brief introduction, Laura suddenly slapped Ichika across the face, shocking the entire class. She then stated that she refused to acknowledge Ichika as Chifuyu's younger brother. As usual after school, Ichika was training with his Infinite Stratos. That day, he was practicing together with Haoki, Cecilia, and Lingyan. Haoki taught Ichika how to properly attack using a sword. Lingyan guided him to understand the essence of Infinite Stratos by feeling it, while Cecilia gave him instructions on defense and evasion. But all of their explanations only left Ichika feeling confused. He didn't understand any of it. The girls were puzzled as to why Ichika couldn't grasp the basics. Not long after, Charles arrived with her own Infinite Stratos and invited Ichika for a practice match. Ichika agreed. Their match quickly caught the attention of other students who gathered to watch. Charles was piloting Raphael Revive, a second-generation Infinite Stratos from France. As the match began, Ichika immediately drew Yukihira. Charles launched into the air and began firing down at him from above. The students were amazed by the intensity of the battle. Haoki looked especially worried about Ichika. He tried to fight back, but Charles dodged his attack and countered, repeatedly targeting him until Byakushiki's shield energy was completely depleted. After the match, Charles explained that Ichika had lost because he still wasn't capable of long-range attacks. She asked if Byakushiki didn't come with an equalizer. Ichika replied that all of Byakushiki's bust slots were already occupied. Charles pointed out that this setup allocated more power to his one-off ability. The one-off ability is a feature that activates when the Infinite Stratos and its pilot are in perfect sync. In the case of Byakushiki, that ability is called Raryakubakia. Ichika said Charles' explanation was the first one that actually made sense to him. At that moment, Haoki, Lingyan, and Cecilia were watching from a distance and clearly annoyed. None of them could believe that Ichika only understood things when Charles explained them. Ichika thought the Raryakubakia was a wild move, especially since it used up shield energy to launch an attack. Charles said the ability was similar to the one used by Chifuyu's Infinite Stratos. But just because Ichika and Chifuyu were siblings didn't mean he could master that kind of power without serious effort. Charles then offered to help Ichika train for long-range shooting. Ichika was hesitant, saying he probably couldn't use someone else's equipment. But Charles clarified that if the original owner disabled the safety lock, then any registered pilot could use it. She helped Ichika aim by guiding his arm, and their close proximity made Haoki, Lingyan, and Cecilia visibly irritated. Charles continued helping him aim at a few targets in front of them. She then asked Ichika what he thought about this way of practicing. Ichika said the movements were really fast. Suddenly, Laura appeared piloting a third-generation German Infinite Stratos model that was reportedly still in the experimental stage. Lingyan looked frustrated by Laura's presence. After all, Laura had slapped Ichika in class not long ago. Without warning, Laura challenged Ichika to a fight. Ichika declined, saying he had no reason to battle her. But Laura insisted that she had her own reasons. Ichika suggested she wait, since there was going to be an inter-class match soon anyway. Ignoring his words, Laura fired a sudden shot at Ichika. Charles quickly moved in and shielded him. Charlotte commented that the German girl seemed to have a short temper for attacking so suddenly. Charles immediately raised her weapon toward Laura. Laura arrogantly dismissed the French-made second-generation Infinite Stratos, belittling its capabilities. Charles, however, confidently defended her machine, saying it was far more practical than a third-generation German unit that might never be ready for mass production. Just as the confrontation escalated, Chifuyu stepped in and sternly reprimanded the students. Laura backed off and left for the day. Still curious, Haoki asked Ichika what had just happened. Meanwhile, Cecilia asked Ichika what kind of relationship he actually had with Laura. In the locker room, Charles approached Ichika and asked if he was okay. Ichika thanked Charles for helping him earlier. Charles was about to head back to the room first, and Ichika asked why he did not just take a shower there. He also pointed out that Charles had never changed clothes with him before, which made him curious. Charles tried to avoid the topic, but Ichika grabbed his arm and even wrapped his arm around him. Ichika said he wished Charles would occasionally change clothes with him, but that made Charles nervous and uncomfortable. Charles suddenly shouted and ran off. Ichika was left confused, not understanding why Charles reacted that way. After changing his clothes, Ichika walked to his room, still thinking about when Laura slapped him and said she refused to acknowledge him as Chifuyu's younger brother. As he approached, he overheard Laura talking to Chifuyu, asking what she was doing in a place like that. Chifuyu explained that she had a duty to fulfill. Curious, Ichika quickly hid so he could listen in. Laura questioned what kind of duty Chifuyu could possibly have on that eastern island. She pleaded with Chifuyu to return to training in Germany. From Laura's perspective, not even half of Chifuyu's abilities were being put to proper use at the school. She felt that the students there were not worthy of Chifuyu's guidance, claiming that they lacked awareness about Infinite Stratos and treated it more like a fashion statement than something serious. To Laura, Chifuyu was wasting her time. Chifuyu asked her not to say such things again. She told Laura that she had become someone important to her, especially since they had not seen each other for a while. Then she asked if Laura had ever thought of herself as someone chosen at the age of 15. Laura was surprised to hear Chifuyu say that. Chifuyu then told her to go back to class, and Laura ran off. Unexpectedly, Chifuyu had actually noticed Ichika's presence. She said she did not approve of his habit of eavesdropping. Ichika was confused by the way his sister treated him. Chifuyu told him he should spend his free time training because with the way things were going, she was sure he would lose in the first round of the upcoming end-of-month tournament. Before she left, Ichika asked whether Laura's refusal to recognize him as her younger brother was because Chifuyu had lost her chance to win a second championship because of him. Chifuyu told him that it was in the past and there was no need to dwell on it. She then walked away. There was a past event on the day of the second Mondo Grosso Finals, the World Championship for Infinite Stratos. Ichika had been kidnapped by someone. He did not know what the kidnappers wanted from him. He was tied up and held captive. Chifuyu came to rescue him even though it meant leaving the final match. As a result, she was disqualified. She had been the undeniable favorite to win the tournament 2 years in a row, so her sudden loss caused a major uproar. To repay the German military unit that had given her Ichika's location, Chifuyu worked as a trainer for the German Infinite Stratos forces for 1 year. Ichika realized that all of this happened because of his own weakness. He felt ashamed for being such a burden as a younger brother. He thought maybe it was time he stopped relying on Chifuyu all the time. Ichika arrived at the room while Charles was in the shower. Realizing the soap was out, he decided to bring her some. Without thinking, he opened the bathroom door. Charles was, of course, shocked to see him. She quickly covered herself. Ichika noticed that her body looked more like a woman's. Charles was extremely embarrassed while Ichika quietly handed her the soap. After stepping out, Ichika finally realized what he had seen. Charles was overwhelmed with embarrassment, knowing that Ichika had seen her bare body. After the shower, they both looked awkward sitting in the room until Ichika invited her to have some tea together. He made the tea and handed it to Charles. Their hands accidentally touched and Charles got flustered. In her nervousness, she spilled the tea on Ichika's hand. He cried out in pain and quickly rinsed his hand with cold water. Charles immediately apologized and checked on his hand. As she leaned closer, Ichika pointed out that her chest was pressed against his arm. Charles was stunned and quickly turned around, calling Ichika flirtatious. Ichika, in turn, was confused by her accusation. Afterward, Ichika asked why she was pretending to be a boy. Charles revealed that it was her parents' decision. It was a direct order from the director of Duno. Charles shared that he wasn't born from the official wife of the Duno director. He opened up about having lived apart from the director for several years before being brought into the family 2 years ago. When Charles' mother passed away, staff from the Duno company came to pick him up. After undergoing numerous tests, it turned out that Charles was highly compatible with the Infinite Stratos. That's when he unofficially became a pilot. During all that time, Charles had only met his father twice, and their conversations never lasted more than an hour. Not long after, the Duno company fell into a financial crisis. Ichika was surprised, especially since Duno was known as the world's leading Infinite Stratos manufacturer. But Charles explained that despite their dominance, Revive was still considered a second-generation as model, while the industry's research was already moving toward third-generation technology. According to Charles, the main reason Cecilia and Laura were transferred was for data collection. Duno was also conducting third-generation is research, but it wasn't going well. If things kept going in that direction, the company risked losing its production rights. Ichika then asked how all this related to Charles pretending to be a boy. Charles said it was simply a marketing tactic to draw attention. By pretending to be male, it became easier to get involved in the special case taking place in Japan. Duno believed they could gather valuable data on both the pilot and the IS unit, so the company sent Charles with the hidden mission of collecting data on Ichika. At that moment, Charles felt relieved for finally telling the truth. He thanked Ichika for listening and apologized for deceiving him. Ichika asked whether Charles could truly accept everything that had happened and just let it go. He pointed out that while it's true no one can be born without parents, that doesn't mean parents have the right to do whatever they want with their children. Charles was taken aback by that, especially when Ichika revealed that both he and Chifuyu had been abandoned by their parents. Ichika admitted he had no intention of ever meeting them again. Then he asked what Charles planned to do next. Charles said she would probably be called back to her country now that her secret was exposed, and she wasn't sure what would happen after that. If she was unlucky, she might even end up in jail. Ichika urged her to stay and simply keep everything under wraps. Even if others found out, he believed neither her father nor the company could touch her due to the Infinite Stratos Academy's rules. As long as a student was enrolled there, They were not under the control of any country, corporation, or organization. So essentially, she would be safe for at least 3 years, and during that time, they could figure out what to do next. Charles was amazed that Ichika remembered that part of the school rules, considering there were 55 clauses in total. Ichika admitted he was pretty good at reading books. Charles thanked him again for protecting her. Ichika told her not to feel awkward around him. Just then, Ichika accidentally caught sight of Charles' exposed chest and quietly let her know. Embarrassed, Charles quickly covered herself. She then innocently asked if it caught his attention. Naturally, Ichika admitted it had. To his surprise, Charles teasingly offered to let him take a better look and joked that he was being flirty. Ichika was confused at how quickly she jumped to that conclusion. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It was Cecilia checking in to ask whether Ichika was feeling okay, as he hadn't eaten anything all day. Without waiting, she stepped into the room and saw Ichika with a blanket wrapped around Charles. Ichika said he was taking care of Charles, who was feeling unwell. Cecilia apologized and asked if she could take Ichika away for a bit since she hadn't had dinner yet. Charles gave them the go-ahead. Without wasting time, Cecilia quickly pulled Ichika along to have dinner with her. Unfortunately, as they were walking through the corridor, they ran into Haoki. She immediately stopped them and asked why they were holding hands and walking so closely. Cecilia replied that it was only natural for a man to guide a lady. Haoki, not wanting to be left out, said she wanted to join them for dinner too, claiming she hadn't eaten enough earlier. Cecilia reminded her that eating too much could lead to weight gain, to which Haoki responded that she would just burn off the calories through her kendo training. Without hesitation, Haoki grabbed Ichika's right hand and insisted he join them both. Ichika had no chance of escaping because both of them playfully pinched him, not letting him go. After dinner, Ichika returned to his room, bringing some food for Charles. Charles thanked him and started eating right away, but was surprised to find that the meal came with chopsticks, something she didn't know how to use. Ichika offered to get her a fork, but Charles stopped him. Ichika told her that sometimes it was okay to rely on others. If she was always too modest or independent, she might miss out on things. He suggested that she start learning to lean on someone, specifically on him. Charles then asked Ichika to feed her. At first, he seemed hesitant, but eventually agreed, since he was the one who told her to rely on him from time to time. Ichika fed Charles, and she looked genuinely happy. Later that night, Laura was at the training arena, lost in thought. She was determined to eliminate Ichika, believing that he had stained Chifuyu's reputation. It was a regular morning in Class 1-1, and a few students were busy chatting about a rumor that had been spreading around. Whoever won the upcoming tournament would get to go on a date with Ichika. Haoki just sat at her desk, quietly observing the conversation. Cecilia asked if Ichika had actually agreed to this arrangement. Yuko explained that Ichika had no idea about it, and it seemed like it was a deal made among the girls themselves. Just then, Ichika and Charles arrived. Charles asked what they were all talking about, but the group quickly dispersed. Lingyan returned to her class, and Cecilia went back to her seat. Ichika, of course, was completely confused about what was going on. Earlier, Haoki had told Ichika that if she won the tournament, she wanted to spend time with him. That's why she was surprised this rumor had started going around. It was supposed to be just her and Ichika, no one else. Determined, Haoki decided she had to win the tournament. That way, there wouldn't be any room for misunderstanding. She reassured herself that things would be different this time, not like before. Back in 4th grade, when she was still in grade school, there had been a national kendo championship. Everyone had expected her to win, but in the end, she couldn't even participate. She lost by default, all because her older sister discovered the Infinite Stratos. The overwhelming power of the Infinite Stratos led to serious concerns over its potential use in warfare. As a result, under the supervision of security agencies, Haoki and her family were constantly relocated, and she ended up living separately from her parents. On top of that, Fabana, her older sister, disappeared. Haoki found herself under constant surveillance, repeatedly interviewed, and emotionally exhausted from the whole ordeal. Still, she kept training in kendo. To her, kendo was the one thing that made her feel connected to Ichika. But one day, she realized that she had become someone she didn't want to be. It turned out she had been using kendo as a way to vent her stress. Haoki came to understand that calling herself strong while using violence as an outlet didn't represent true strength. That wasn't the kind of strength she wanted to have. She began to wonder if she could still win, without misunderstanding what strength truly meant, and she made up her mind she had to do it for her own sake. Later that afternoon, Lingyan arrived at the training arena. Not long after, Cecilia showed up as well. Lingyan said she was there to practice for the upcoming tournament, and Cecilia admitted she had the same idea. Lingyan challenged her to see which of them was stronger. Cecilia didn't back down. Lingyan arrogantly claimed that everyone already knew she was stronger than Cecilia. Cecilia smiled calmly and said that the weaker the dog, the louder it barks, and to her, Lingyan's overly confident behavior seemed to fit that saying perfectly. Annoyed, Lingyan activated her Infinite Stratos. Cecilia immediately did the same. But just as they were about to start their match, a sudden explosion was fired in their direction, catching both of them off guard. It was Laura. She had launched the attack. Laura was using Germany's third-generation Infinite Stratos unit, Schwarzer Rogan. Lingyan shouted at her, asking what she was thinking by firing at them like that. Laura smugly remarked that Shenlong from China and Blue Tears from the UK looked much better in person than they did in the pictures. Lingyan, angered, challenged her and called her a masochist. Laura dismissed both Cecilia and Lingyan without a second thought. She even insulted their home countries, saying they were only known for their large populations and historical lack of talent. This infuriated both girls. Laura then asked why the two of them didn't just attack her together. She was confident she wouldn't lose to a pair of losers fighting over a breeding dog. Cecilia and Lingyan were even more upset now that Laura had insulted Ichika. Fueled by frustration, they charged at her together. At that moment, Ichika and Charles were walking toward the training area when they overheard other students mentioning that the representatives of 3 countries were currently training at Arena 3. Shocked, they rushed over. Shortly afterward, Hoki arrived too, curious about what was going on. Ichika had no idea what Cecilia, Lingyan, and Laura were even doing. The battle raged on. Lingyan launched her Ryuhao attack, but Laura confidently said it was useless. Ryuhao couldn't penetrate the electric shield of Schwarzer Rogan. Laura managed to stop Ryuhao's attack from Lingyan using her AIC. AIC, which stands for Active Inertial Canceller, is a third-generation weapon from Schwarzer Rogan, also known as the Inertial Arrest ability. At that moment, Lingyan kept firing, but Laura easily neutralized her attacks. Lingyan couldn't believe her weapon was ineffective against Laura. Laura then extended a rope to trap Lingyan with ease, and she wondered why Lingyan's Infinite Stratos was considered a third-generation model. Cecilia immediately fired at Laura, who tried to dodge. Both of them exchanged shots, but unexpectedly, Laura threw Lingyan, still caught in the rope, towards Cecilia, causing both of them to fall. Laura approached them as Lingyan attempted to fire a cannon at her, but Laura shot first. Seeing this, Cecilia launched a missile at Laura, resulting in a big explosion. Lingyan called Cecilia reckless for firing a missile from such close range. Cecilia guessed that Laura must have been hurt. Surprisingly, Laura wasn't affected by the blast, and it was her turn to counterattack. Laura trapped both Lingyan and Cecilia's necks with her rope weapon and then hit them hard. They couldn't fight back because they were restrained. The attack was fierce, and there was even a warning that the force had exceeded the safety limit for their well-being. Seeing this, Charles became worried since Lingyan and Cecilia's shield energy wouldn't hold much longer. Haoki said if the damage kept increasing and their Infinite Stratos were forcibly shut down, their lives could be in danger. At that time, Laura continued to strike the helpless Lingyan and Cecilia. Haoki was reminded of a past kendo match where power was used irresponsibly. Ichika tapped the arena's protective barrier and asked Laura to stop fighting, but Laura just smiled. Ichika immediately activated his Infinite Stratos, broke the arena's shield, and drew his weapon to attack Laura. However, Laura stopped him easily, and Ichika found that he couldn't move his Infinite Stratos at all. Then Lingyan and Cecilia's Infinite Stratos disappeared, and both of them collapsed exhausted. Laura called Ichika foolish because his moves were predictable and emotional. To her, Ichika wasn't a match since he was nothing more than an insignificant little person in front of her and Schwarzer Rogan. Just as Laura was about to shoot him, Charles rained down gunfire from above, continuously attacking Laura. Meanwhile, Ichika quickly took Cecilia and Lingyan to a safer spot. At that point, the shield energy of Byakushiki started to fade, and Laura aimed to shoot again. Fortunately, Ichika managed to use Ignition Boost just as Laura fired, causing her shot to miss. Charles didn't stop bombarding Laura with gunfire. Ichika laid Cecilia and Lingyan at the edge of the arena, and Cecilia admitted that she and Lingyan had done something embarrassing. Ichika was relieved because they were now conscious. Haoki couldn't do anything since she didn't have her own Infinite Stratos. At that moment, Charles got caught in Laura's rope, and Laura was about to attack Charles with her sword. Luckily, Shifuyu stopped her with her kendo. Shifuyu allowed the duel to continue but said she couldn't allow anything that would destroy the arena's protective barrier. She asked everyone to settle a fight in the upcoming interclass tournament. They all agreed to follow Shifuyu's order. Shifuyu then banned all fights until the interclass tournament began. After that, Cecilia and Lingyan were taken to the school's student infirmary. Lingyan said that Ichika didn't really have to save her, and Cecilia even mentioned that if the fight had continued, she and Lingyan would have won. Charles came by with some drinks and asked both of them not to try to act tough. Charles believed that they were just embarrassed because they had messed up in front of the people they liked, and of course, neither of them wanted to admit it. Ichika asked why they had fought with Laura. Hearing that question, they were so surprised that they almost choked. Cecilia said that Laura had hurt women's pride. Charles then asked if Laura had insulted Ichika, but Cecilia and Lingyan immediately covered Charles' mouth to stop him from saying anything else. Ichika told Cecilia and Lingyan not to move too much since they were injured. He gently touched their shoulders, and as expected, it caused them pain. Ichika asked them again not to act tough. Cecilia and Lingyan called Ichika stupid, but he didn't understand why they behaved that way toward him. Before long, some students came into the infirmary holding a notice that said for the upcoming class tournament, to make the battle simulation more realistic, students had to compete in pairs. Those who didn't choose their own partners would be assigned partners by lottery. Everyone wanted Ichika to be their partner. Ichika apologized because he had already teamed up with Charles. The students then left one by one. Ichika felt relieved, but then Lingyan asked him to be her partner because they had been friends since childhood. Cecilia forbade it, saying Lingyan should choose someone from her own class. Suddenly, Maya said that she couldn't allow Cecilia and Lingyan to participate in the tournament because the damage to their Infinite Stratos suits was beyond grade C. Cecilia and Lingyan couldn't accept this easily, but Maya insisted that they still couldn't join because their Infinite Stratos suits needed full repairs, and if not, it could cause serious malfunctions later on. They all thought about spoiling the competition that allowed the winner to date Ichika. So they encouraged Ichika and Charles to win the tournament because if Ichika and Charles won, no one else could date Ichika. Ichika and Charles thanked Cecilia and Lingyan for their support. Maya was even moved by their beautiful friendship. That night, as Ichika and Charles were about to return to their room, Charles thanked Ichika for choosing him as a partner, saying it made him happy. Ichika said it would be dangerous if Charles partnered with someone else and his true identity as a girl was discovered. Charles was touched by how much Ichika cared about him. When they got to their room, Ichika asked Charles not to talk like a guy when they were alone. Charles explained that before coming to school, he had been trained to speak and act like a man to keep his secret, so it wasn't easy to switch back, but if Ichika didn't like it, he would try to speak more like a girl when they were alone. Ichika told him not to force himself and even said that Charles looked cute when acting like a guy. Hearing that, Charles was deeply moved. Ichika stepped out for a moment because Charles was changing clothes, but Charles asked him not to leave because he didn't mind Ichika being in the room while he changed. Besides, it would be awkward if Ichika was outside since other boys were changing, so they stood back to back while changing. After they took off their clothes, Charles suddenly screamed because he twisted his ankle and fell down hard. Ichika looked over, and they both stared at each other awkwardly. Ichika immediately jumped to help him, but accidentally grabbed the back of Charles' clothes, and without realizing it, he pulled off Charles' underwear. Charles was shocked and kicked Ichika until he fainted. Charles quickly laid Ichika down on the bed. He didn't expect someone with Ichika's appearance to do something so embarrassing, especially since Ichika could have just asked politely from the start. Charles remembered how Ichika wanted him to stay at school, and it was the first time Charles truly felt needed by someone. Before falling asleep, Charles kissed Ichika on the forehead. The next day was the day of the class tournament. Many VIP guests came to watch the competition between classes at Infinite Stratos High School. The supervisors were there to oversee the third-year students, while the others observed the progress of the second-year students over the past year. At that moment, Ichika and Charles were in the locker room changing clothes. Ichika was curious about who Hoki would be paired with, especially since any student without a partner would be assigned one by a random draw. Charles guessed that what Ichika was really thinking about was competing against Laura. He advised Ichika not to let his emotions cloud his judgment. According to Charles, Laura was the strongest first-year student at that time. When the pairings were announced, Charles and Ichika were surprised to learn that Hoki was teamed up with Laura. Hoki was clearly very upset upon hearing that she had to partner with Laura. She remembered Laura's intense and emotional match from the previous day, which reminded her of her own past experiences in Kendo, a time marked by fierce competition.